very extensive. So I learned about all the different coverages that a contractor could have. And surprisingly, there are a lot of overlaps with many different industries. I guess it's not too surprising, but contractors have a lot more requirements. So I learned about all the coverages, what they do and why we need them, and how the additional insureds worked and the waivers and all that. So started doing that at about 19, and about 2021, I started selling for the agency I was working for. So just started selling a lot of workers' comp policies, which is kind of its own little headache. And then jumping into liability, professional, property, all that. So just so I could offer everything for my clients, and got my life and health license. And now I actually sell a lot of medical as well. So I would say I'm pretty versed in all the different lines that any business really in California would need. So.
And interestingly enough, you're right. General contractor, really, that's what we do, right? As a planner, we are the general contractors. We hire,
exactly
all the different entities, and we'll get a little bit also into venues and COI and stuff like that where some of the questions posed. But so there will be a lot of similarities, and that will be interested because everyone is connected for each event in some sort of way, and we're each trying to protect not just our own business, but our own business while we're on site or doing the event itself.
Absolutely.
So awesome. Great. So like I said, for those of you that chimed in just a little bit late, please feel free to use the chat box for questions as they come up. And we'll start with the questions that were posed for us. And Jared and I had a chance to review it right before this call. And let's start maybe, Jared, why don't you educate us with what types of business insurance is there out there and what does each cover?
Sure. So your basic general liability is going to be probably the most prevalent policy that you'll find for any business. It's going to cover things like liability on your premise. So if you own a venue, that's going to be huge. Obviously, if someone trips and falls on your property, that's where that coverage comes into play. And then a lot of people who have a product to sell would need products liability. So even if you're selling coffee or anything on your venue, that's going to be products liability. That'll be included in that general liability policy typically, although they can be on a standalone basis. But if you have the right agent, they're going to pair you with a liability policy that covers both, and a couple of other incidental things in there that'll be more enhancements. And then,
for products, do you have to sell? Does it mean that it's an exchange of money on site, or is it product? The client paid for the coffee.
I'm trying to think of a circumstance where you wouldn't be selling, but you'd still have a product. But yeah, it would basically be if you're selling any product, that's going to hit it right there. Yep. Mm-hmm. So if you have any product going out and people are using something that you have provided, that's going to that exposure is going to be there.
So it could be food. It could be basically a caterer.
Yep.
It could be a photo booth, photo strips.
Yeah, even that. Yep. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. So that's general liability. That's going to be your first major box ticked right there. Property coverage. Obviously, venues know about this. Property is a huge deal. You're going to need business personal property to cover kind of a blanket limit for any property that you have on the premise. And then you will want to schedule a large property. So if you have special computers or any sort of special equipment, you'll want to schedule that so you actually have a better limit just for that one particular item. So if you have things like photo booths that are expensive or I don't know what
pizza oven.
Yeah, pizza. Yeah, things like that. Seriously. If you schedule those, you're going to get a little bit better coverage for those things in the event of a claim. So that's your basic property coverages, and you can get more in depth of things in transit. If you're delivering, there's an exposure there. If you're moving money around, there's exposures there. But that's going to be your basic property coverages there. And then obviously, if you're delivering or if you have vehicles, auto coverage, auto liability with comprehensive and collision insurance. Very important to have, obviously. And if you're a business and you have autos, you already have seen quotes for this. Commercial limits do go higher, and they are usually a combined limit, which will be a little bit more beneficial in the event of a claim. but it does cost a little bit more than I would say your standard personal lines policy. And then you get your professional, which I didn't even touch on professional, but that's basically another type of liability, almost instead of general liability. So a lot of people will only need professional liability if they're advising, if they're like you, where you're just putting an event together, but not necessarily making a product or selling a product, or you don't have a venue that people are coming to. You're going to have really a large professional exposure. So you're the one managing this event. You're the one putting it all together. A lot of this liability lies with you. So if something goes wrong, that's where this coverage will kick in. So that's another major one. And then the last one will be workers' compensation. So workers' compensation is if you hire any employees, and now even if you 1099 somebody, you're going to need to make sure either they have their own insurance if they're 1099, or you are covering them, and everything you pay them is payroll. So you're going to have to put that under your workers' comp policy. So making sure they're covered if they're injured on the job. So
Perfect.
those are the major ones.
And when you say that they're covered, if they're 1099, if they're covered, does that mean health coverage if they get injured, or what if it's should they have professional liability coverage if they're more a consultant?
Yeah. So if they're 1099, they're acting as their own business. So in that case, I would highly recommend, if someone's 1099, they should have their own LLC or some sort of S corp, get that corporate veil of liability kind of covered. But even if they don't, there is a lot of exposure there that you'll want to make sure you're covered for. If you are hiring a 1099 and they don't have those coverages on their own, you're going to be looked at as the employer. So you're going to be looked at as the major. You're the general contractor in this case, where liability will jump towards you if they're not covered on their own, and especially with the workers' comp. The workers' comp is a huge exposure. And if somebody comes to you and they're 1099, you're going to want to make sure that they show you that they have their own workers' compensation coverage if they have employees. If it's just them, it gets a little tough. Sometimes they'll have to buy their own workers' comp policy with zero payroll, even though they have no employees. Otherwise, you can work out some sort of deal where you know that you're paying for the work comp coverage for that 1099 employee. So it's kind of how that works.
Yeah, and I know that was big with the AB5 that came into play this year. Obviously, with COVID, that kind of were like everyone rushed to get to paychecks and have everything buttoned down, and then things didn't happen. So we'll have to revisit that, I'm sure, at some point when events open back up. Just talking about the different kinds of coverages, someone had asked about commercial umbrella insurance. What is that?
So an umbrella extends the limits of multiple lines of coverage. So the way you can look at it is there's excess coverage and umbrella coverage. Now, excess coverage just extends your limits. So a standard liability policy might have $1 million per occurrence, $2 million aggregate. What an excess policy would do is extend those limits. Say you bought a $1 million excess policy, your limits are now $2 million, $3 million occurrence in aggregate. So that's what an excess policy does. An umbrella policy does the same thing, but to multiple lines. So say you want higher limits for your auto and your liability, you would get an umbrella policy that would have those two underlying coverages. So the auto, let's say, is $1 million combined single limit, and then you have your general liability, that's $1 million, $2 million. It would then extend those coverages up to $2 million for the auto, and then $2 million per occurrence and $3 million aggregate. So umbrella is the same as excess, but it applies to multiple lines.
Right. And I know sometimes, like, I've used that term with couples, or clients requiring them to get covered for a specific event. They may have, if it's a corporate event, their own insurance. Couples don't tend to have wedding insurance, and most places require it. I always suggest it, and that would be an umbrella policy for that through their insurance agent.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, if they already have some sort of coverage, there are ways to add additional coverage on there, especially for a one-time event. In fact, when I got married in a backyard, and what we did was we bought a $375 event policy that just covered the liability just for that one event. And it just kind of was a way to ease our minds and not have to worry about anyone getting hurt on the premises, making sure that the owner was protected. So.
Yeah, exactly. That the owner's protected if someone's injured. I know, having worked at a venue, I worked at a resort,
Yep.
The lighting guy plugs something in and the power goes out. But,
Yep.
who's liable for that kind of stuff. And then one of the questions also was did we cover it, the COI insurance that venues often require?
Sure. Yeah, so COI is just a certificate of insurance. So that's just it's a one-page document that shows all of your different lines of coverage that you have as a business, and it usually pertains to someone with an interest in you. So you'll have a certificate holder listed at the bottom, and so your agent will make that for you, and they'll list all of your different insurance lines, and they'll name the certificate holder. Maybe it's a venue or someone that owns the property you're trying to plan an event for. You'll name their name there so that it's obvious that they are of interest. They have an interest in your coverages. So, and then real quick, there are multiple ways to add on additional documents as well to the certificate, like additional insureds, waivers of subrogation, more ways to protect the owner of the property, making sure that you're the one that the insurance carriers are going to be backing in the event of a claim.
And not all venues require COIs, or not all event locations, or what are your thoughts on that? Should we always be pulling a COI for every single event that we do?
So if you're a venue, you're protecting yourself by requesting this certificate of insurance. So you're making sure that the person that's coming to work for you carries their own insurance. And not just that, but you're also making sure that they're naming you as a certificate holder and hopefully additional insured, and providing a waiver, which is then going to make sure that if anything happens and it's in the capacity of your working for that venue, you're going to be the one covering that claim. You're going to be the one that's covering the damages or whatever it is. So it's protecting the owner or the venue when they collect that certificate.
So if a venue doesn't require it, or let's just say it's Aunt Susie's house, I, as a planner, should still pull a COI because they may not officially know about it?
You can. It's basically it's you offering to provide your coverages for the event if you do pull a COI and give it to that owner of the venue. If they don't require it, typically they are just assuming the liability for what you're doing. There's still ways that the insurance carriers are going to put it on you if they can directly link it to your work, but it's going to add it's going to make it easier for them to basically use your coverages first and foremost.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So let's talk about what's been going on for the last 120 days. And I know this was one of the first questions that came up during COVID. Yep. Was what insurance covers it? Is there any additional insurance changes, suggestions, anything added on? Let's talk about how it was, how it could be, how it should be kind of thing with COVID.
Sure. So the main, the only coverage right now that is actually covering COVID-19 claims is workers' comp claims that are in the health industry. And that's because they are getting it in the line of work. So if you're an EMT and you're dealing with a patient who has COVID-19 and you catch it, that's going to be a cause for a workers' comp claim with whatever carrier that EMT has. So that's the only true coverage that has covered anything in regards to COVID-19 so far. But there are a lot of things going on politically, a lot of legislation in the works to make it so that loss of income and what's the coverage? Business interruption coverage, which is a type of property coverage. Business interruption coverage is excluded if there is a fungal or bacterial infection, and in this case, a virus. It's fungal, bacterial, or viral infection is excluded. specifically stated on the policies, because they've been through this before with past epidemics, past issues. So what they do is their attorneys draft these policies with those exclusions in there, but there is legislation that they're trying to get to go through right now where these claims would still be covered under those policies, even if they had this exclusion on the policy. So I have a lot of clients that are still filing claims for their business interruption coverage, even though they know they're going to get a declination letter, because they want that letter in hand should the legislation go through. So that would be the only real kind of weird thing happening with COVID-19 right now. The other one is the workers' comp. You're not going to get a workers' comp claim covered if you are a manufacturer or an event planner or anything standard, anything outside of the scope of medical. COVID-19 claims just won't be covered under work comp right now. So.
And educate me a little bit on business interruption. Is that an additional type of insurance? Is that something that's in my general liability? How do I look to see if I have it? What am I looking for?
So that's a property coverage. It's part of your property policy. So it's seen that way because it's kind of like seen like a loss of property. So as soon as you start, so we have a few clients down in LA, and when the riots started happening, they had to shut down their shops for several weeks. And when that happened, once they were past the deductible is actually a time frame. So say they have a 30-day deductible. After 30 days, they have a basis for a claim because their business was interrupted, and they saw a slow resurgence back into business as well. So they actually saw a dollar figure that was lost. So that's why it's under property, because it's a dollar figure that is lost due to some sort of event. And in this case, it was the riots. So that was a perfect example of why business interruption coverage is a great one to add on to the property. And it's usually not too expensive compared to property coverage. So.
And by property policy, again, for consultants or planners, I mean, I get that maybe a brick and mortar might have property policy, but what about a consultant?
It's tough. I would say lean more towards the business interruption side of it. You can have a small business personal property policy in place for your laptop and small items that you might have due to the business. But the main one is going to be the business interruption, I would say there.
Okay.
Yep.
And then a pandemic insurance. Is there such a thing? Does it exist? What does it look like? Will there
is such a thing. So huge companies, big corporations have pandemic insurance, and they do cover things like this, but they're very large. So I said that the only thing being covered is medical under workers' comp for the medical field, but actually it's almost anecdotal because there are a few policies out there written through the excess insurance lines in Lloyd's of London, and they will cover very large corporations for probably hundreds of thousands of dollars for a pandemic like this. And so there are very large deductibles. They have to have very high retention. So, but they're designed for very large companies. I mean, you're talking Facebook, Google, these very large companies that in the event of a pandemic, they will have some sort of basis for a claim to get some money back due to these losses. So it's almost, it's anecdotal. It's such a small percentage of companies that actually this applies to. And it's just not offered to companies that are smaller than these giant corporations. So
gotcha. And it wouldn't do someone any good. Sorry, it wouldn't do someone any good now per se to get business interruption or property policy and backtrack, right? Or is there still a chance to?
Yeah, it's. I mean, it's. Yeah, you wouldn't have a basis for a claim with the COVID-19 now. You would have to. Yeah, you could place it, of course, but because COVID-19 has already occurred, it'd be tough. The only way I could see it helping at all now is if the state opened back up and then coverage was placed, and then somehow the state shut back down due to COVID-19, that might be a basis for a claim. And that might vary carrier to carrier. They might say, you know what, it's already, COVID-19 is already a pandemic in play right now. This shutdown could have been anticipated. Or they might say, hey, this is a new shutdown. We're going to allow you to make the claim. So I would definitely advise looking into it, at least seeing what it costs. It is fairly cheap for what you get. And it's just kind of good peace of mind, especially for you guys. This is a very, very, this is all about events, what you guys do. So that's a big, big coverage to keep in mind.
And speaking of that, I mean, one of the conversations, and I'm catching you off guard on this, so bear with me, but I just thought of it, is one of the conversations that's happening is because right now events are not allowed, right? We're not allowed to do gatherings, ceremonies are allowed, and there's people, believe it or not, still having weddings and events on the down low. Right. I've gotten inquiry calls for them. Am I covered? If the government isn't allowing me, if the state government isn't allowing me to do events, and maybe I didn't know, I go do an event for 30 people, would my insurance cover me?
You're going to be covered. Insurance is private, so it's not going to have anything to do with the current lockdown. You'll absolutely be covered. And there could be an argument for the legality and saying that they won't cover illegal operations.
Right.
But at the same time, that actually has a lot to do with the carriers you choose. So some carriers are very willing to pay claims out, right off the bat. I remember when the fires happened here in California, Malibu, anyone who had Chubb was amazing. They came out and they just wrote a check like within the first, I think, week or two of the houses burning down. So there are carriers like that, and then there are other carriers who will do all of the research and they'll jump in, they'll do an inspection. The State Farms of the world, they're going to come in and check everything out before they pay $1. So it kind of comes to that. I would say it depends on the carrier that you're with and how they react to claims. Mm-hmm. So you can definitely pay for a better carrier, but you're going to see it in the premium. If they're paying out more, they need to collect more. So yeah, that's kind of how it works with that.
Okay. One of the questions, a little generic, but what's new and improved with business insurance? Anything you want to share with us, or?
Yeah, new and improved. I wouldn't say much has changed. I mean, everything is evolving with technology. There's a lot more cyber liability out there these days. You're seeing a lot of people getting hacked, a lot of phishing emails going out. So I'm selling a lot more cyber policies to my clients these days, which is definitely something at play for every single business that's out there. If you're sending an email and you're receiving emails, that's an exposure to you. A lot of ransom attacks. So they'll attack your files and say, hey, we're not releasing your files until you pay us $2,000 per file, something like that. And we actually, our agency was hacked about 3 years ago. And luckily our IT guys were able to get around it and fix it. But we didn't have cyber liability at the time, which we didn't really, it was still pretty new. It was like 3 or 4 years ago. So now we have a cyber policy in place for that specifically. And we sell it a lot because it is a very, very common occurrence. Other than that, I would say general liability, workers' comp, auto liability, it's been the same for years and years. It's the same exposure. It's just we're evolving around tech a little bit more, I would say. So,
does cyber liability cover something like social media as well?
There can be clauses added in for that. Yes, mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, but I would definitely, so cyber is a very, very particular policy. So you're going to want to know exactly what the business is doing and exactly what kind of coverages they want under that cyber umbrella. There's a lot of stuff that can be covered under cyber. And it's kind of picking and choosing which policies. And the carriers have developed a lot of very specific cyber policies for specific types of businesses. So it's kind of nice. As an agent, I can go in and see which policies will fit an event planner. And they might make suggestions saying, you know, you can add this clause on or this endorsement on that's going to cover them for this, this, and this. And there are these big enhancement endorsements that just add a bunch of additional coverages for usually very cheap. So yeah, they're evolving greatly around cyber right now.
I was just thinking how timely to talk about that when some of the Twitter accounts that were just hacked into from
Elon Musk, I think, right? When one of the other guys,
President Obama.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Interesting. I actually was hacked on Facebook recently, and what they did, and this is for everyone, what they did is I got a text saying, hey, one of your comments, someone didn't like your comment, log in for more information. When I went to log in from a text, it made me log in through Safari, not go to my thing. I did it anyway, even though I thought it was weird. Lo and behold, the next day they had used my ads account and had created 20 ads at the maximum amount, $997 a day. That would have been a $20,000 day. And I caught it within 30 minutes because again, I got a text saying, or that this time it was a messenger saying, hey, your ads are up and running. I was like, wait, what? And it just a matter of 30 minutes, it was almost $200. I got my money back from Facebook, but like you just don't think of this stuff, right?
Right. Yeah, it's crazy, and they make their text look, you know, very legitimate. It's very tough to see these days. You have to be very aware as a consumer, as a business owner. You have to be very, very aware.
And I got 3 messages yesterday, 3 different Instagram accounts saying, hey, I've been working on this for you.
Yeah.
Click on here. And now I'm so careful, and I messaged that person and they're like, oh, I got hacked. Yeah. So it seems to be happening a lot more in just a couple of weeks. So thanks for that. Absolutely. We'll have to talk more about my policy and getting more cyber.
Sure. Yep, we can talk
cyber
about
stuff. So do you suggest, this was specific for event planners, but let's just talk about wedding event industry professionals. Do we need insurance?
Absolutely. Yeah.
A guitarist, a videographer, photographer?
Yeah. I would look at it because there are some very, very good policies out there that are very cheap. If you, let's see, if you're maybe a wedding band, you know, you're moving a lot of equipment around, you can get a small policy for your equipment. Say you, I don't know, maybe an amp falls over while you're driving around and it breaks. You could have coverage for that. You know, you have a very low retention policy. You know, $20,000 business property policy would cover everything in your van. You know, there are a lot of different coverages that you can look at. Liability for a band might be a lot less, but there is some, you know, let's see, maybe you have, I don't know, maybe you have special lighting and it could fall over, or your speakers, those big heavy speakers up on the stands, those could always fall over. That would be the liability of the band. And again, if you're not collecting these certificates of insurance as a venue, basically you're assuming that liability for the band until you request that certificate. So for the smaller guys, you know, it's tough. It's tough to justify spending $500 on a policy, you know, when your revenues might be barely more than that per month or whatever it is. But for the larger ones, I would definitely suggest looking into it at least and getting a quote and seeing what it is, because I think you'd be surprised what coverages you can get for very little. You know, these carriers do all the numbers on it for a reason. It's going to cost, you know, very little amount for a large amount of coverage because there aren't that many claims in that space, maybe. So yeah, I would definitely suggest at least looking into it and seeing the different lines that apply to you and going from there. So.
And like I said, I mean, even for a venue or a musician, even if it's just a guitarist, they're plugging in their amp, who knows what could happen.
Sure.
We didn't talk about errors and omissions, and that's something that's obviously what brought us together, was this errors and omissions. It's something I didn't know existed.
Sure.
What am I covered for with that? Because I don't know that a lot of planners know that, what it's for, or other event professionals.
So an errors and omissions policy or professional liability, is the way I always coin it is if you are advising anything to your clients. So if you are planning and setting things up, obviously as an event planner, you are setting up this whole event. If what you do causes a loss, so let's say the owner is out $20,000 because something that you did. I can't think of something off the bat, but
Well, I can tell you a story. I wonder if this
sure.
would have covered it. I remember doing an event and thinking that I was closing the pool cover off the venue, the property of the owner was the parents of the bride.
Right.
And instead, I think I turned on this thing for the pool and the motor burnt out.
Oh, wow.
So I
Yeah.
made the decision to, and now I don't touch anything electrical. Would that be errors and omissions? Or could it be that, like the client who was pissed because the champagne was served warm?
Yeah, it'd be more of that. It'd be more of
Yeah.
that. So even though you're not the one serving the champagne, it would probably go to the caterer, like you
Right.
said. It'd be more of that. It'd be more of things that you have set up for the event and fell through or went wrong because of you. So let's say you accidentally told someone to come the day after the event, and now they lost out on food for the day,
Mm-hmm.
and then they had to order in and out or
Mm-hmm.
something. That could be a claim. They would have to come up with some sort of dollar amount, the carrier would, and say that that's how much this claim was worth. This food that they were expecting to serve was worth. So that would be your error as a professional in your field. So it's
Mm-hmm.
your duty to be a professional and do that correctly and set that up correctly for the event. So it's like I said, it's advising. Whenever there's advising, if you are saying, hey, this is how we should do it, this is what we should do, there's definitely a lot of exposure there.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. And that's the umbrella that a lot of planners fall under. So I did want to touch on that because I think it's so important and it's not well known.
Sure.
And I know that very few carriers carry that. I know that like RV Nucio and there's another wedding one specific for weddings. They do not cover that. It is not a policy they cover, period.
Yeah. Professional is a very niche line. So there are only a few carriers that really write it. And especially for event planners, we went surplus lines for you because and surplus lines is the same as any other carrier. They're just not guaranteed by the state of California. So there's no backing by the state, but they're backed by their own money. And so as long as you're with a reputable carrier, you're fine. But yeah, we had to go surplus lines for you, which means typically they'll write weirder, odder exposures. I do a lot of contractors on the surplus lines side because it's just a very niche thing, professional liability for an event planner. So
well, and that's what the clients are hiring us for, to make decisions
Yep.
on their behalf and have the knowledge. So we just don't have a crystal ball all the time.
No one's perfect.
Well, except me. Just kidding. How much does insurance cost? Either wedding planning? How much? Do you have any price ranges? How much should someone be spending?
Sure.
Whether it's, you tell me.
Sure. Yeah. It's this is tough. So a lot of underwriting goes on, especially when it's an odd exposure or a professional line. Professional is underwritten very, very deeply. So the underwriter will look into exactly what you're doing. I think when we quoted you, it took over a week, I think, to get a quote because they had to really look into what you were doing. They looked at they had you fill out a full application that explained every little bit of your job and what you do. Because it's very underwritten. So you're not just getting a standard rate based on what you do and then they just run with it. For you, they actually had to look at every little detail. I think your minimum premium, if you don't mind,
Yeah, sure. No.
premium amount was $750, and so that was the minimum premium, which means your premium might have actually been less should they have rated it on a rating basis. So it might have been $550. But the carriers charge a minimum amount. They don't go below a certain threshold for certain types of policies. And in this case, 750 was the minimum premium, and that was the cheapest carrier that we could find for you for what you do. But if you're a venue, there are probably lower minimum premiums. I've seen minimum premiums as low as $250. So it depends on what you do. But once your revenues start getting higher and higher, you're going to actually be applied a rate. So for general liability, typically it's a rate per 1,000 in sales. I've seen a rate of $4 or $5 per 1,000 for some of my contractors, but you could have a rate as low as a dollar or two per 1,000 in sales. And that would be an annual premium basis. So that's kind of how that works with liability. Workers' comp is going to be a dollar figure per $100 in payroll. So for an event planner, it might be, let's say, $8 per $100 in payroll. You can basically add 8% on top of your outgoing payroll for that payroll going out. Clerical rates go as low as 50 cents per $100 in payroll. So yeah, it varies quite a bit from company to company, depending on what you do, your exposures, how much payroll you have, your size, a lot of different things. So it's hard to give you a one-off, hey, this is how much it'll cost. And that's kind of the point of what I do is I provide these quotes that are very particular to what you do as a business.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's, again, that's so much what I appreciate about you. And I wanted to bring you on because I know that there's coverages out there that you can do online. It seems easier. You fill out the form.
Yep.
When I opened up myself to, crazy clients and seeing that, oh my gosh, they could take things out of context and this and that.
Sure.
I needed more succinct guidance for what I do, more personalized approach. And, that's the guests that we have on here today. You guys really should talk to Jared because he'll listen to exactly what you're doing and modify it to what you want. Because I just don't think insurance, that's the whole point, is a coverall for everyone. And there are entities that do that, but does it really do us any good when we need it?
Sure.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, we joke about it in the office that, one day agent's going to go away, you're going to be able to go online to do everything. But we joke about it because we know that if I think that we all have job security as agents because there's so many different variables and you really do need an expert these days. And I think we value the education side of it because, I mean, you'd be surprised how deep these underwriters get, how many different questions they ask. And when I approach somebody, a contractor that's doing drywall, and I ask them, hey, how high are you going? Are you going over 24 feet? Well, guess what? That's going to cause this. There's a lot of different variables and we've seen it all because we've quoted it all. And we all talk about it with each other at the office. We're all talking about all the different exposures we run into and what happened on the carrier side. And we learn from each other. And so there's that specialist aspect to it that really is helpful for you guys. You don't have to do all this stuff on your own. You just come to us and we figure it out for you. And it doesn't cost you anything extra. We're just the middle guy pairing you with the right policy. And the carrier pays us to do that for you. So.
Yeah. And again, for everyone listening, Jared was so patient with me so many times. And even just recently where I was like, it was actually interesting, our recent interaction, because I'm like, I don't have any events this year. Do I need to get insurance? And I think most of our audience right now has that question. What is your answer to that? It's like events are postponing or canceling throughout the rest of the year.
Right.
Do I renew my policy? What are your thoughts? What's your advice?
Sure. Yeah. It's tough to say because we have some clients who it just doesn't make sense to renew their policies because they might be going out of business. It's a very real smack in the face for us. It's crazy. So, but we do have, I think we had that discussion where you were saying, hey, do I need to renew if I don't have any events coming up? And I said, I would renew because of the type of policy you had. You have a claims made policy. So we ended up renewing because we're covering your tail of the several years of coverage that you've had. And so that might be a different variable we don't have to get into, but there are different types of policies where claims made covers you for prior years, but the current policy still covers you for those prior years. Whereas occurrence would be when that claim happened, that old policy will still cover that claim as long as it happened during that time. So for you, it made sense to renew. Being a minimum premium policy, you might be out a few dollars now, but it'll make sense down the line if you have a claim that comes to bite you later.
Yeah.
So.
If someone comes out of the woodwork, which again, the events industry is so ironic that could be the case for someone.
Absolutely. But it is definitely a case by case basis. What people are doing, it's a conversation that needs to be had. It's definitely a weird spot we're in right now. So
yeah, such a limbo.
A lot of hard conversations with my clients right now. So
I bet. We'll open up to some Q&As. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to chime in. And while we do that, Jared, do you want to tell people how they can find you? And I'll put your contact information in the chat as well.
Yeah, no problem. So we do have a website. We're based out of Moore Park, California. So I think if you type in Moore Park Commercial Insurance, I think we come up as one of the top, but we're H&S Insurance Services. So that's Holland and Siegler. So those are the last names of our two owners. Insurance Services. And my contact, I think, yep, there it is, hs-insurance.com. That's us. And my email is jholland, so Holland like the Netherlands. You'll see it there on my last name, at hs-insurance.com. And there's my cell. So that's my direct line if anyone needs to call me with any questions. But yeah, I see a couple questions. Jake has a question.
Yep.
Hey, Jared, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good. I've got a few things here, but
Sure.
So we're a mobile pizza caterer. We are currently not cooking for events during this. We do have insurance. We use flippergram insurance. It's kind of more specific to like food trucks, I believe, and sort of those.
Did you get that? Did you go direct? Did you do that like online?
Yes.
Okay, awesome.
But one question related to that is that every year it gives me the option, and I've purchased it, but I don't even know what it is. It's called marine insurance for my trailer.
Yes.
Can you explain what that is more?
Sure. So marine started back in the days of people covering the property on boats. So it's your property in transit. So you probably have a set limit. It might be $25,000, it might be 15, it might be 10, something like that. But it will cover property in transit. So marine is basically property in transit on that trailer. So your trailer is usually covered by your auto policy. So whatever trailer you're towing is going to be covered by the vehicle you're towing it with. But marine insurance will actually cover the property that is on that trailer in transit while it's moving.
Okay. Second question is along the lines of workers' comp. So this is something, it's just Carrie and I, we're kind of a mom and pop's catering service.
Sure.
We do occasionally bring in a friend here or there to help though, when that happens. And I guess my concern with workers' comp is that, and I think you explained it earlier, that it's a percent per dollar or per $100. But each time I bring in if somebody just comes in to help me for an afternoon or for an evening,
right,
I assume the answer is yes, I need workers' comp on them to be covered.
Yeah, and it's so tough to say this, but yes, it's an exposure. They could technically, what if they slipped and fell while they were working for you? You're liable. And the thing that's scary about that is if you don't have the coverage, technically it is a criminal liability. If you don't have the coverage there, it's technically illegal, which is crazy to think when you pay someone, you're probably paying them cash and just, hey, come and help out. But it is very, very cheap to get a policy in place, and you can actually just specify 0 payroll on the policy, and as if you're going to have none, and you'll pay like, I don't know, maybe $300. You'll go through the state, and we can set that up for you. You'll pay like $300 for the year, and then if you do end up having payroll, you'll only pay based on that small amount of payroll. So you might pay a couple $100 for the year if you have a few $1,000s of payroll. Mm-hmm. So I would definitely look into that and just getting that policy. I mean, it's so cheap and it covers you
It's always been on my mind, but it was one of those things where I thought, like, in the back of my mind, I was thinking like it was more of a number of employees. Like if I cross a threshold of 5 employees or 8 employees throughout the course of a year who are helping me, am I going to all of a sudden be paying thousands of dollars in workers' comp for minimal help?
Right. No, it's just if you're paying anyone, that exposure is there, and I'm not too worried about. I wouldn't be too worried about that. I mean, if these are your friends and you're just paying them cash, and
well, if I have somebody chopping an onion and they cut the tip of their finger off, I know that's me.
Yeah. So, you're probably going to step forward and say, hey, let me help with your, let me pay your medical bills and things like that. But if they, for some reason, said, I'm going to go talk to a lawyer, you could be in trouble. So,
got it.
It's just a little scary. But it's, yeah.
So then third question, and I think this would cover it then. We're more of a catering specific company. We are currently selling frozen pizzas to go. Health department's involved. They're cool with it. They like what we're doing. You mentioned earlier product insurance, but also just within that same realm, like are you familiar with Flippergram Insurance? And like, is that
I've heard of it. There are a lot of different ones like that. I've heard of it.
Is that the right kind of policy for me as an event caterer to be in, or do we need to be into something that's more underwritten?
Probably. So a lot of those are just a one-off, very, very simple, straightforward liability policy.
Yeah, I mean, like you click a couple buttons.
Yeah, exactly. And they're designed for, exactly what you do a lot of times. So I wouldn't be too worried about that as long as all the right coverages are there. And I'm happy to review them for you if you want. You can just shoot them over to me.
They've been accepted by everybody I've ever sent them to. It's
awesome.
Like $2 million general policy. So
perfect. Yeah. So you're probably fine. I would say that a lot of those direct online things are great for that. And they're cheap. You can pay very, very little for those, which is great. So
comparable to what you quoted for Zoe. So it's in that same ballpark. So that's what makes me wonder of like, if it could be more specific and in that same ballpark.
Yeah. And so it might be that I go and quote the same exact type of policy for you. So and like I said, I'm happy to review it and just check it out. But yeah, it's probably plenty of coverage. And especially it sounds like they're catering to you a little bit with the inland marine addition there, which is awesome. So they kind of know what you're doing and they know what to offer you and what you need. So, cool. I wouldn't be too worried. Yep.
Thanks for those.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Great question.
Absolutely.
I know Tracy has a question. I'll let Tracy jump on, and then I have a question too, and then we'll close with that.
Awesome.
Hi. So I have the
Interactive entertainment.
I even wrote that down so I wouldn't forget it, and I forgot it. Business. So I have a lot of equipment, and I had my stuff in storage. I've had it in storage for probably about 1.5 years, and right before the lockdown, my storage unit got broken into, and I probably had about $10,000 worth of equipment stolen.
Jeez.
And I didn't have insurance on my equipment. And then we went into the lockdown and I went back. So there was nothing I could do. I couldn't move it because we weren't supposed to do anything. And then Memorial Day weekend, I went back to my storage unit and I'd gotten broken into for a second time.
Oh, my God.
And so probably about at that point, about $15,000 worth of equipment was taken. Okay. And then I went back 2 days later with friends and trucks to get all my stuff out of there, and had gotten broken into a third time.
Wow.
And they didn't.
This is
really,
at a storage unit?
Yeah, public storage.
Okay.
And they didn't really get anything because I had taken, when it happened the second time, I'd taken everything, computers, cameras, everything like that, anything that would have been of value to them. But they did, what they stole were my bins. So I had bins of props and crap, and they emptied all the bins into the middle of my storage unit and stole all my bins. So in the process of all this, I was trying to get coverage for this stuff.
Yeah.
And when I went to my broker, who I've been with for 35 years probably. He came back and said, because you've been broken into 3 times, nobody wants to insure you. So my problem with this is I didn't make any claim because I didn't have any insurance. I moved everything into
Right.
a different facility that was had much better security.
Okay.
And the guy said nobody would insure me. Lloyd's of London might, but it would be $18,000 a year.
Oh. So it's if you didn't file any claims, it should have been fine. I think he's. I wouldn't see an issue with that if you didn't actually file any claims with any carriers, because it's just as if you had a new policy, especially when you go to you're taking it to a new facility. I wouldn't see a problem with getting a policy for you like that. That's surprising to me that he wasn't able to find you something.
Yeah.
That's
kind of what I thought too. And I thought I wanted to get all my stuff done. And as I'm itemizing everything, I stopped at $120,000 worth of equipment. And I can even, pare it down from that, but $18,000 a year to cover $120,000 just seems
that's
ridiculous.
That's extremely high. So I don't see why there would be an issue unless there was something else that he wasn't telling you. So I don't know. I'm happy to look at it for you as well. If you'd like.
I would like you to.
Sure, no problem.
What he said was he had to fill out a questionnaire. And I guess the question was something around, has this, company been burglarized in the past or something like that?
Right.
And he said that because I questioned him on it, and that was his response. And he said, well, I can't lie on the questionnaire or I'll get in trouble. And it's like,
but if there was no claim and you've now moved that equipment to a new place, it shouldn't be an issue. That just takes a phone call to the underwriter to explain and just say, hey, this all has been moved to a different place. It was broken into at a place that was less secure and totally different than where it is now. I don't think that would be an issue for me, at least. That's just a phone call to an underwriter, because as soon as an underwriter sees that on the app, they might say, oh, whoa, I don't want anything to do with this. But it might be easy to just explain, hey, all this equipment has been moved, and here's what happened. And it's not like somebody's targeting you specifically. They're targeting your non-secure, not very secure location. So now it's in a different location. They're not going to follow your stuff to your new place. So
okay.
I think that'd be an easy conversation to have with an underwriter. So
okay, well, I'll send you an email and see about getting a quote.
Okay, no problem.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
We'll wrap it up because I do like to keep these to an hour, Jared, and I do want to thank you. One quick question that I had, and maybe it's a moot point that we discussed. Let's just go back to this whole COVID conversation.
Yeah.
Let's say that people are still doing them. What if a guest at the event gets sick? Who's liable? I know we talked about coverage.
Yeah, that's just going to be the guest got sick. That's all there is to it. So it's not going to be on anybody at the event or any planner or any venue owner or anything. They just got sick. So even if they know where they got sick from, it's basically, how are they going to prove it? And even if they could prove it, it would just be very, very tough to try and uphold that and for a claim. It's just with the COVID-19 right now, it's just, if you got sick, you got sick, and that's basically how it is. The only people being covered are people in the medical field, because it's very obvious that they, 90% of them are getting it, that got it from their job. So
right.
The carrier's just saying, we're going to cover all of them because it's, that's the right thing to do, really. So,
okay.
But yeah, the COVID-19 thing it's an exclusion across the board, basically. It's kind of crazy, but the attorneys knew to look out for this. They know this stuff happens, with the past SARS and swine flu and all the mad cow, all those crazy different things. They know to look out for this, and they put that writing in their exclusions for this exact reason. So as soon as this came up, they they just denied all the claims coming through, and the only way to overturn it would be some sort of legislation within the state. So
Interesting. Okay.
see
That's
what
what I wanted
happens.
to hear.
Yep.
Good.
So,
Well, this was amazing, Jared. I really
Great.
appreciate your time and being
Absolutely.
here today and helping me put this together for everyone.
Sure. Thanks for having me. I appreciate
Yeah.
it.
And I appreciate everyone who joined us today. We'll be back next week. And Jared, I'll be in touch individually. We'll
Sounds
reach
good.
out to you about my
Right.
cyber policies.
All right. Awesome. Yep. Sounds good. All right. Take care, guys.
Bye, everyone.